We are recording. All right, cool. So,
Okay.
thank you for joining me as I continue to try to just provide some exposure about graduate school in psychology, whether it be clinical counseling, school psychology, social psychology, just graduate school in different, psychology related fields. So today, I am joined by one of my mentees when I was a PhD student and who was a master level student and was part of my dissertation team.
Yeah.
Um, Now a doctoral candidate, right, at the University of Georgia.
Yes.
So I'm gonna let you go ahead and explain, introduce yourself, Erica, and tell the world who you are.
Yeah. So my name's Eric McKinney. Born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I did my undergrad at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Um, my undergrad was in sociology and social welfare.
Hmm.
I initially went in pre-vet. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. But turns out I wasn't really good at math or science, so had to kind of make some changes. Right from undergrad, I did 4 years and I went right into my master's program at Marquette University. That's when I met Darnell. I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling with a specialization in addictions counseling. So that was in 2013 is when I graduated from my master's degree. And part of my program, like most counseling master programs, had to do a practicum and an internship. I did mine at the same site, which was AIDS Resource Center of Wisconsin Behavioral Health Clinic. So I was working, providing individual and group therapy to people living with HIV, AIDS, and other co-occurring health disorders, as well as co-occurring psychological concerns. So worked with a lot of folks with trauma, addictions, um, depression, anxiety, kind of you named it. I didn't know that when I did that practicum and internship that would actually bring me full circle back into what I'm studying now as a doctoral student. So in my master's program, I had some amazing mentors, Darnell, Dr. Lisa Edwards, Dr. Ong. I told them like I'm interested in getting a PhD. I talked to my clinical supervisor at my internship site. She was a Black woman. She's like, yeah, like apply. So I applied to, oh my gosh, like 13 or 14 places. I was all over the place. There was really no strategy that I used.
Yeah.
I didn't really talk to anybody about it. I was applying to like PhD, clinical and counseling psych
Hmm.
and PsyD forensic psych. I was all over the place. Didn't get an interview anywhere, which was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
Mm.
Because I did not really, I knew I wanted to be a psychologist, but I really didn't know what I wanted to focus on. I just knew I wanted to do it. So the universe, God closed that door. And so then for the next 4 years, what I ended up doing is working in all these different settings. I was in a medium maximum men's prison. I was in a psych hospital. I was in voc rehab. I worked at, I was a third shift crisis worker. So I was on call. So like I would get calls in the middle of the night and I'd have to go out to either like a police station, an alley, a hospital,
Hmm.
and determine if like somebody needed to have their rights taken temporarily because they were like a danger to themselves and others.
Right.
But my longest jobs that I held was I worked as a voc rehab counselor for the state of Wisconsin full time. I did that for 2.5 years. And then part time, I worked at the psychiatric hospital on the addictions unit. So I did
Okay.
those two together for like 2.5 years. And then my
Hmm.
last year before going into my doctoral program, I worked 3 jobs. Do not
Wow.
recommend that. And my third job was the third shift on call position. It was a crazy year. But all of those experiences really helped me kind of focalize on what I wanted to do as a
Hmm.
clinician, as a researcher, which was
Okay.
working with folks who had chronic health conditions.
Okay.
Um, so I then did another round of applying for PhD programs.
She said,
This
"I done done did."
I done did, right? So like my journey was not linear. Like I did
Right.
not I didn't even get interviews the first time, right?
Right.
Like not an interview offer anywhere.
Yeah.
And so it was a redirection for me. This next time I applied, I was very clear about what I wanted to do. I had gotten my licensed professional counselor license, every substance abuse credential. I had my supervising credential. So I was able to really talk about what I wanted to do and why.
Yeah.
So I think that time I applied to, I think, 10 programs,
Okay.
got 3 interviews,
Hmm.
2 offers. And ultimately, I chose to come to the University of Georgia. One, my advisor is amazing. And then our program is really unique. It's a counseling psych program, but then we're offered a subspecialty in health psychology.
Nice.
So, yeah, so that's like, that really sold me on UGA. And of course,
Okay.
funding. They
Hmm.
were like, we got funding for you. And I was like, say less, I'm coming.
Huh.
Um, so, since I've been in the program, all of my research, clinical work has been within the realm of health psychology.
Okay.
My dissertation is looking at how chronic or Black women who experience chronic headaches cope and manage them. Um,
Wow. So where are you at right now with your dissertation?
I'm doing a qualitative study.
Okay.
Saturation is probably going to be about 7 participants, and I have
Hmm.
6 interviews done. And
Okay.
I've already been we've been coding as we go with
Okay.
my
So a
research.
lot of people may be watching this or listening, right, and say saturation. What does she mean by that? What can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So what that means is, so one, I'm doing grounded theory. So what I'm doing is developing a theory to better
Hmm.
understand Black women who are experiencing headaches. So
Okay.
saturation, in the kind of just the most general terms, is you're continuing to interview people and nothing new is coming up. No new
Okay.
things are coming up.
Okay.
And so once that happens, you want to stop the research or stop the interviewing, and then you want to, look at your codes,
Hmm.
bring codes into themes, and then help that theme or those themes develop the theory.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No.
you got to talk about the dissertation and stuff. So your dissertation, you was talking about health psych, and you was getting your dissertation. That kind of where you are at your grad school, right? So typically grad school is anywhere from what 4 to 6 years, right?
Yeah, depending on what type of psychology program you go into and
Hmm.
what degree you might have before,
Hmm.
entering into that doctoral program.
And so you're at a stage now where you're working on your dissertation, right? So this is more the latter stage, and I believe that you recently were accepted for your predoctoral internship program, right? So you'll be
Yes.
heading off soon to go do your internship, which is besides the dissertation is the last academic aspect of completing your doctorate degree. So where are you going
Yeah.
for your internship?
So I am so happy to announce that I matched at my number one site, which is Henry Ford Health Sciences Center in Detroit, Michigan. And I matched in the health psychology / consultation liaison track.
Okay.
And so within that track, I'll be doing rotations in bariatric surgery, transplant surgery, internal medicine / primary care, and I'll be doing a
Hmm.
minor in trauma surgery.
Nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice. And then um, with the internship and then your dissertation, you'll be done, right? So, getting into this point, so what are a couple questions that I would like to ask to kind of explore a little bit, right? Use
Yeah.
some qualitative research terms, right? Explore.
Yeah, yeah, for
Uh,
sure. For sure.
so the topic I like to explore, right, is you talked about initially applying to graduate school, several different graduate schools, and not being accepted, but then kind of getting your refocusing
Hmm.
um, what you want to kind of like I would say your interest areas,
Hmm.
and just kind of be very discreet, so therefore you can speak to it, right? Because in graduate school or just anything, when people see the passion, they can see it. They can see the passion when they're reading your application, when they're talking
Hmm.
to the interview, so it's
Hmm.
important to understand really what you want to do, right? That's important.
Hmm.
Um, but once you got accepted to the program, right? Can you kind of just talk about some of the challenges of being a graduate student?
Yes. Oh, wow. There was a lot of them. And I think different challenges presented themselves throughout different phases of my program.
Hmm.
So, one of the big things that I struggled with throughout being in the program was imposter syndrome, right? So, being like, all right, I got in,
Yeah.
but like, was I real? Like, did y'all really want me, or did y'all take a chance on me? Right. So I really had to work through my imposter syndrome, especially being a Black woman from
Hmm.
Wisconsin
Hmm.
coming to Georgia. I had never lived outside of Wisconsin, and
Right.
so I was not only coming to a doctoral program, I was coming into a community and a culture that I wasn't familiar with.
Right.
And so I really had to find my grounding on that.
Yeah.
One of the other struggles is, like I mentioned, I had 4 years off between my master's and PhD
Mm.
program. So being a working professional, it's amazing, right?
Hmm.
Like you go to work and then you go to the gym or you do
Hmm.
whatever after you get off work. There's no
Right.
homework assignments. There's no like paper. Like you just do your 40 hours and you go on about your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my first year, I really struggled with getting into a routine, right? Of
Hmm.
like, okay, Erica, yeah, you only got class from 9 to 10:50 on a Monday, but then what are you going to fill the rest of your time with? And so I really had to figure out how to make this journey work for me.
Yeah.
So for me, my first 2 years, I really front loaded everything. I did as much research as I could. I, went to as many conferences as I could. I tried to get everything that I needed.
Hmm.
Um, I think kind of consistently, right, a challenge in the program is comps. I haven't met one grad student who was like, comps was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Um, so comps was, it is what it is, right? It's very challenging. I would say also my biggest challenge, and this is where I had to kind of reframe how I thought about this process. I went in thinking that I was going to struggle primarily academically.
Hmm.
I hadn't been in school in a long time. I didn't come from a research-based master's program,
Hmm.
so I was like, I'm really gonna struggle.
Right.
Um, that's not where the struggle came. The struggle
Hmm.
came with life happening while you're in a PhD program.
Yeah.
And nobody really told me that, right? So,
Yeah.
like, you're going to get sick, people are going to get sick,
Hmm.
a pandemic is going to happen, right? There's going to be breakups,
Right.
there's going to be job loss, there's going to be health
Hmm.
problems, you're going to experience, performance anxiety. Like, I didn't know that all of these things
Right.
were going to happen simultaneously. I just
Right.
thought I was going to be scuffling through the mud, just trying to do
Yeah.
what I could academically.
Right.
That didn't end up happening.
Yeah.
So I would say like those were the biggest challenges. But I
Yeah.
will say with the pandemic though, and I think this is just something that I've learned being a working professional, I've just figured out how to make stuff work for me.
Hmm.
So when the pandemic happened, I was like, cool, I'm stuck at home. I can't see clients. I'm going to just go ahead and push out my first 3 chapters of my dissertation and defend my proposal because what
Why
else am
not?
I doing? There's only
Yeah.
so much Netflix and video games I can play, right? I was like
Yeah.
blowing through money, buying video games for my Switch and my Xbox. I'm like, I could just be sitting at my computer, right?
Yeah.
Working and getting myself through and out this mud. So,
Yeah. That's what's up. So two things I I kind of want to follow up on what you said. Right. The first one is consistency. Right. So from day one, once you go into graduate school with a kind of focus on what you want to do, and typically you're working with a professor, your advisor is somebody where he or she uh, does or research things that you're interested in, right?
mhm.
So all your papers that you do, right? Because you're going to have to do a lot of reading, writing. Um, how did you navigate those papers to kind of align with your research interests? So therefore, when it comes to year 3 or year 4 of submitting your dissertation proposal, you'll have a lot of the body. You kind of work smart, not hard.
Yeah.
That's something that you kind of did.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, and I tell anybody this, when you're thinking about going into a graduate program, you really need to think about, are these professors that you want to work with?
Yeah.
I specifically applied to work with my advisor
Hmm.
because she was doing research that I was interested in.
Okay.
And so when like, you know, one of our like first advising appointments when I first came into the
Mm-hmm.
program, she kind of asked me like, okay, you're interested in health psychology, you know, what aspects of health are you interested in? And I was like, well,
Yeah.
I don't know. And then she's like, okay, well, here's some of the research I'm doing.
Mm.
And here's some research that I haven't been able to do because I haven't had any students interested in it since I've been at UGA.
Okay.
That's how I got interested into headache research. So within
Mm.
my first semester of my PhD program, I knew that my research was going to be on headaches. And so then from there, right? So when we had classes, so like for example, our multicultural class, we had to do like a presentation on an issue around multiculturalism in whatever aspect of psychology. I'm
Right.
like, boom, I'm going to talk about health disparities when it comes to headaches in
Mm-hmm.
African Americans. That's multiculturalism. That's health psychology.
Nice.
In my like history of psychology class, we had to do a presentation on a subspecialty of psychology. I want to be a health psychologist. I'm doing a presentation on health psychology,
Okay.
right? So anytime I had the opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
get creative with a paper or a presentation, I was always bringing back my
Right.
headache interest, my headache research, or any type of health psychology topics.
Right.
That just allowed me to very fluidly
Mm-hmm.
go through my program and still like get that generalist training that you get
Yeah.
as a counseling psychologist, but then also keeping in line with my subspecialty, which is health psychology.
Yeah. That's
So
dope.
by yeah, I would say like by second year, I already knew what my dissertation was going to be on.
Yeah.
And people in my cohort were like, Erica, you crazy. Like, we ain't even hit comps yet. I'm like, that's cool though.
Right.
That's cool if that's not where you at, but this is where I'm
Right.
at. And this is what I'm doing. And this is
Huh.
what works for me. And
Yeah.
so I ended up being one of the first people. No, I was the first person in my cohort to defend my proposal.
Nice. Nice. So it sounds like you were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when no light was visible. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then so the follow up question, right? I said it was two different things. Was self care, right? So what does self care look like? Because one of the things that um, I stress now as a therapist, as a psychologist, is the importance of self care, right, and balance, right. Even as a psychologist now, um, I, I try to prioritize self care, but sometimes I don't do a good job at it, right. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
perfect, right. And but in graduate school, the first time I really was exposed to the term self care. I remember Dr. Knox used to always talk to us when we used to have classes. Self care. What are you guys doing for self care? And Dr. Knox. One of the things that I appreciate about her was she was a big Buckeyes fan. She sung in the choir at her church, and I believe she was a runner too. But those three things, she was very adamant about doing things to take care of her well being. So it was a good example, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
started thinking about like, man, what do I do for self care?
Yeah.
I sleep on the bus. Uh, I drink lots of coffee at Rainer Library.
Yeah.
And then Marcel and I we used to call Rainer Club Rainer. So
Yeah.
that was our self care, staying up in the library all night,
Yep.
in order to just knock out things. Um, but it also really, really laid the foundation that self care is important. And
Mm-hmm.
I started to really, really incorporate those things into just my personal life, period.
Yeah.
So, can you kind of speak about some of the self care practices that you picked up in graduate school?
Yeah. So I'll be very transparent. My self care practices have ebbed and flowed tremendously throughout my grad program. And I
Hmm.
think that's important to also acknowledge, right? Like it changes based off of
Yeah.
what you need. So, like my first year, um, my self care, I was hitting it hard
Hmm.
because first year wasn't too intense for me.
Yeah.
So I would do things like I have a pool in my apartment. Literally, it'll be like Wednesday at 3 p.m. It's 90 degrees because I'm in Georgia. I'm like, I'm about to go sit at the pool and read a book that I enjoy reading
Yeah.
because I have the time to.
Hmm.
Or I have a dog. We would go like to the dog park. I have a balcony that faces the sun. So like
Hmm.
sometimes I just go sit out there, and even if I'm like mindlessly on like social media or something like that, or I would go
Yeah.
work out. Second year is when we started assessments. That's when self-care like non-existing.
Yeah.
I wasn't practicing it, and I
Hmm.
wasn't intentional when I would practice it either.
Yeah.
It was most times just be like a happenstance.
Hmm.
Like, oh cool, my last three clients didn't show up. So I got 3 hours. Let me go to the gym.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't like I had built that into my day. It
Hmm.
just so happened.
Yeah.
Also, to be fully transparent, I've worked since my second year. So, in addition to taking
Hmm.
classes, doing practicums, doing advanced fellowships, I still work on the side. And I
Mm.
started that my second year.
Okay.
Just because financially that grad school budget is very limited. And for me, limited finances equals a whole lot of stress. So I had
Yeah.
to find a way to kind of find that balance.
Yeah.
So come second year, like I said, between just the rigor of the program plus
Hmm.
working, just wasn't practicing self-care that well.
Right.
Same with third year, wasn't practicing it that well either. And
Hmm.
so after 3 years of just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, my
Hmm.
body literally sat me down. I
Mm.
got really, really sick and had to be hospitalized. And I was like, okay, you have to start prioritizing self care.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a lot of work
Yeah.
around um, being a Black woman and what self care means and what that looks like,
Yeah.
and talking to my community about the importance of
Right.
me needing to rest.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, yeah, I can do all these things and I do it with a smile and I'm doing very well, but my body is literally breaking down and it's not supporting me anymore.
Yeah.
So since then, like I said, I had to do a lot of work right around like rest and
Hmm.
knowing that like we deserve rest as grad students. I think that's
Right.
a really big thing, especially if you're in a cohort model. It's very easy for you to start looking at what other people are doing or other people are accomplishing and feeling like you need to fill your time with more things,
Right.
right?
That FOMO, fear of missing
That
out.
yeah, like the FOMO and the imposter syndrome. Like, oh, well, Betty Sue was over here writing a paper with such and such. Well, let me take that hour that I would write.
Why it gotta be Betty Sue? Why can't it be Leroy Jackson or
It could be
Tyrone?
Leroy Jack. It could be Tyrone. It could be Tyrone. It could be Tyrone and Betty Sue working with the
Hmm.
professor, right? And so I really had to just remind myself, like, do radical self care, right?
Yeah.
And so now for me, radical self care may look like, you know what? I am about to play my Nintendo Switch for an hour. Yes, I
Hmm.
am almost 32 and I have a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
I'm about to play video games for an hour
Yeah.
because I need to rest and rejuvenate and I need to do things that make me feel good.
Yeah.
Sometimes self care looks like I am going to eat a meal that is
Hmm.
nourishing, right?
Yeah.
No Chick-fil-A, no
Uh-huh.
Zaxby's. Like, let's get some vegetables and some
Yeah.
lean protein in your
Right.
body and some water. So really like just being more intentional
Hmm.
about it. And I
Hmm.
will say you can tell, like, if you are in tune with
Hmm.
your body will tell you when you need more self-care.
Agreed.
Um, a big one
Agreed.
is sleep.
Mm.
So for me, I am not my best self if I don't have at least 7 hours of sleep a
Yeah.
night. So that for me is practicing self-care.
Mm.
That's my self. I have to sleep. If I do not sleep, I am no good to anybody, especially myself.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's changed over the years, throughout the program.
Right.
And I'm sure again it'll change during internship
Yeah.
as well. But I think, just being able to acknowledge that that is a very fluid thing, and like what
Uh-huh.
maybe worked for you in one season
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily work for you in the next season.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you just consistency, right? That consistency may fluctuate, but as long as you stay consistent
Mm-hmm.
with taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
and having those um, those triggers or those signs, and they'll let you know that, hey, I'm getting out of balance, right?
Mhm.
And so yeah, so that's good stuff. And I think, uh, just my unsolicited advice, right? Is take that same consistency and self care when it comes to studying for that EAAA. Take it from
Woo!
someone take it from someone who thought that, oh, okay, yeah, I'm smart, right? Take that EAAA first time, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
and when they switched it from, um, you start getting your results right then and there. If you get to the front and you hear that second page get printed out, like, oh, I ain't passed this test. So I'm telling you, I mean, I really, really, when it came to taking my EAAA, to become a licensed psychologist, because you go all to school, right? If you don't get licensed, what's the point? Um,
Right.
so, um, so I had to really take self care seriously, and it was like, okay, how do I
Mhm.
prioritize, right? Because you have that fear of missing out. I want to continue to be the best psychologist, practicing psychologist that I can be,
Yep.
or be the best non-licensed psychologist. It's like, whoa,
Right.
whoa, time out,
Yep.
time out. You can't be a psychologist unless you're licensed.
Right.
And then so I had to do a gut check for myself, and then realize, like, okay, make sure my sleep was good, make
Yes.
sure that those breaks, right? So I would study for 45 minutes, and then I would take a 10, 15-minute break in between.
Mhm.
I would have those benchmarks, right? And then when you went in there, I took that test, I was ready to go. My hands wasn't all sweaty because at one point I was in there like, oh, I was taking like, but again, because my self care was out of whack, right? And you had all these cognitive distortions, like, I'm not, why do I have a PhD?
Mhm.
They just gave it to me. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I've never
Mhm.
done well on standardized tests. But then I was like, you know what? Nah, dude, bro, you got this, bro.
Yep.
And I went in there, and that support system, right? Because um, and crushed it, right? And went out there and heard that one page print off. I ain't needed. I ain't need to say anything. I would have read it. I took it off. I heard, man, that was, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, so when it comes to each of a P, Erica, make sure you
Yeah.
you stay consistent with your self care. So um, so as we get ready, so man, we've been chatting. So um,
Just like back in the day, like, man,
just
let me get on up out your office so we can do some work.
but this has really been good, right? Because I think students and people who maybe be in graduate school can hopefully hear something, take something, and realize, like, you know what, I too deal with imposter syndrome. I too deal
Yeah.
with the fear of missing out syndrome,
Mhm.
and maybe just a relearn, or just realize, like, you know what, I need to work on my self care again,
Mhm.
and prioritize that.
Mhm.
One of my biggest motivations, I mean, my grandma, right? She raised 12 kids, and some grandkids, and then went back to school, got her associate's degree at Compton College, which hopefully one day I can go teach at myself.
Yeah.
Um, but you can do it, right? Whether it's young, old. You was 4 years removed from your master's program. I think I was like 4 or 5 years too from my master's program to
Mhm.
my PhD, right? Working a full-time job.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's like, I want more, right?
Yep.
I want more. And
Yep.
when you want more, sometimes you gotta take that chance and say, you know
Yep.
what am I willing to do to get more?
Absolutely.
Um, and because when you get it, what do you do with it? It's one thing to say, yeah, I got a piece of paper, right? I got this license, but what are you doing to help others, right?
Right.
So that's the whole intent of this. So
Yeah.
I appreciate this, Erica. I really do.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting me to talk about my experience. Like I
Yeah,
said, it hasn't been linear, but I think sometimes we get caught up, right, in
yeah.
what we want and how we want it, and when it doesn't show up when we want it to show up, it can
Hmm.
be discouraging.
Yeah,
But we have to take those no's as redirections.
right, right. That's what's up. Well, I thank you.
Of course.